a waitress, an arrogant millionaire, and a grand piano. What began as a cruel attempt to humiliate her turned into a moment that left the entire room stunned and shattered, every ounce of pride. You won't believe how she turned the tables with nothing but her talent. It was a warm Friday evening, and a soft hum of conversation filled the air inside La Fontaine, a high-end restaurant, tucked away in the heart of Raleigh, North Carolina. The gentle clinking of glasses, the quiet shuffle of servers' footsteps, and the faint strains of jazz melodies from the piano in the corner blended together to create an atmosphere of elegance and sophistication. Selena Brooks, a 25-year-old waitress with a reserved demeanor but a special glint in her eyes, moved swiftly between tables, expertly balancing plates and polite smiles. To most patrons, she was just another face in a uniform, but inside, Selena carried dreams far bigger than the glitz and glamour of this dining room. Selena's true passion had never been waiting tables. It was music. Since childhood, the piano had been her sanctuary, the place where she poured out every joy, sorrow, and unspoken thought. But dreams didn't pay the bills. Endless shifts at La Fontaine were a necessity, a stepping stone toward the music academy she longed to attend. Only a handful of employees at the restaurant knew about Selena's talent, occasionally catching her sneaking a few melodies on the battered upright piano in the break room during rare moments of downtime. That night, just as the early evening rush began to ebb, the restaurant's front doors swung open and Mitchell Crane walked in. Instantly, his presence drew every eye. The wealthy businessman, notorious for his sharp tongue and his love of putting on a show, strode in as if he owned the place, trailed by a handful of equally slick companions. Mitchell exuded such arrogance that even the most seasoned staff members instinctively straightened at the sight of him. Selena glanced around at her colleagues. They exchanged knowing looks. Mitchell wasn't an easy customer. He was the type who found pleasure in pushing others to their limits. But to Selena, he was just another table on a long list she had to serve that night. At least, that's what she thought. Mitchell swept his gaze across the room until his eyes landed on Selena. Something about her made him pause for a brief moment. Then a smirk curled on his lips. Selena could feel the heavy weight of his stare, but she ignored it, focusing on refilling water glasses and clearing plates. What she didn't know was that Mitchell had already made up his mind. Tonight, she would be his entertainment. Selena had grown up in a small town in South Carolina, where dreams of reaching beyond often sounded like fairy tales. Her mother, a resilient single woman, worked double nursing shifts to support her children. Despite the hardships, music was always present in their little home. Her mother's old vinyl records and a worn-down piano gifted by a neighbor had nurtured Selena's love for melody. That piano became her refuge. While other children played outside, Selena immersed herself in teaching herself how to play, learning everything from catchy pop songs on the radio to classical pieces found in tattered second-hand books. Her talent didn't go unnoticed. Selena performed at church gatherings, school recitals, and community events. But local acclaim couldn't tear down the financial barriers that separated her from her larger dreams. By the time she turned 18, Selena realized that a professional music career would have to take a back seat to the realities of life. Scholarships hadn't come through. Her family needed her. Her dreams of performing were tucked away in a drawer, making room for the steady grind of survival. Still, she never truly gave up. The piano wasn't just a dream, it was a part of her. When she moved to Raleigh a few years ago, Selena took the job at La Fontaine not just for the good pay, but because of the grand piano that sat quietly in the corner of the dining room. Even though she rarely had the chance to touch it, knowing it was there was enough to soothe her soul. Music was still there, simply waiting for its moment. That evening, as Mitchell Crane and his friends settled at their table, Selena approached with a tray in hand, her movements practiced and composed. Mitchell ordered a fine scotch, making jokes loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Selena smiled politely as she took the order, keeping her voice steady even though she could clearly feel the strange energy radiating from him. "Selena, huh?" Mitchell glanced at her name tag, smirking. "Sounds like a name hiding a lot of hidden talents." The comment made Selena pause briefly, but she gave a courteous nod and moved away to place the order. She didn't see the sly look Mitchell exchanged with his companions, nor did she notice the lingering gaze he pinned to her retreating figure. Mitchell wasn't simply observing. He was plotting. And Selena Brooks, before long, would find herself thrust into a performance she never volunteered for. The night continued, as it always did, filled with murmured laughter and the clinking of cutlery against porcelain. Selena Brooks kept her pace steady, weaving between tables, carefully avoiding Mitchell Crane's eyes. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but there was something different about Mitchell. Not just rudeness, but a cold, calculating edge. His presence hung in the air like a dark cloud, making Selena uneasy in a way she couldn't quite explain. As the appetizers were served, Mitchell began his performance, but not the kind of performance Selena was used to. He launched into a loud monologue at the table, bragging about his business conquests and mocking those he deemed lacking ambition. His companions laughed on cue, like a well-trained chorus, while other diners cast irritated glances their way. Selena tried to focus on her work, but as she returned to Mitchell's table with a bottle of wine, he suddenly spoke up, stopping her in her tracks. "Tell me, Selena," Mitchell said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room. "When you're not carrying plates around, what do? A young girl like you must have some dreams, right?" The question made Selena hesitate mid-step. She paused, then carefully replied. "I play the piano, sometimes," she said softly, hoping the answer would be short enough to end the conversation. Mitchell's eyes lit up, and a sly grin spread across his face. "A pianist, huh? Now that's interesting. Why don't you perform for us a little?" Selena froze. The air in the room seemed to thicken, Mitchell's words hanging in a tense silence. I can't," she said with a strained smile, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just working tonight." But Mitchell wasn't about to let her off that easily. "Nonsense," he declared, his voice booming. "There's the piano, right there in the corner. Show us how talented you really are. A future star shouldn't be shy about a little audience, right?" His companions laughed, feeding off the cruelty of the moment. Other diners began to turn their heads, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Selena felt her chest tighten. She could feel the heat of all those prying eyes, the silent judgment crackling, ready to ignite. She wanted to refuse, to turn and walk away. But Mitchell's challenge hung in the air, like an invisible tether pulling her back. "I really shouldn't," Selena stammered, glancing toward her coworkers, silently pleading for support. But even they hesitated, unwilling to step in. Mitchell leaned back, sipping his scotch, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "Ah, I see," he sneered. "All talk, no action. What a disappointment." Those words struck Selena like a slap. She clenched her fists at her sides. Selena wasn't someone who sought confrontation, but that blatant contempt, as if she were invisible. A cheap joke, cut deeper than she had expected. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Selena. You are bigger than anything they could ever imagine." A long, heavy silence stretched between them. Selena glanced at the grand piano, then turned back to face Mitchell, his smug face daring her to rise or shrink away. And against everything logic told her, Selena made her decision. "Fine," she said, her voice low and steady. "I'll play." The room seemed to stretch tight with anticipation as Selena made her way toward the piano, each of her steps heavy with both fear and defiance. The light from the chandelier above shone down, forming a lonely halo around Selena as she approached the gleaming grand piano. Her fingers trembled as Selena sat down on the bench, the keys reflecting a cold gleam as if challenging her. Behind her, Mitchell lounged back, his face full of triumph, as if he had already won even before the performance began. Selena closed her eyes for a moment, adjusting her breath. Her heart pounded so loudly it almost drowned out her thoughts. This was no longer a church performance or the warm community gatherings of the past. This was a battle. A cold, judgmental arena. There was no turning back. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the cool smoothness under her fingertips. The first note sounded soft, tentative, almost fragile. A few diners shifted in their seats. A cough echoed from the back of the room. But Selena shut out all the noise, focusing every ounce of her mind on the current of music swelling inside her chest. Selena chose a piece she knew by heart, a soulful rendition of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The melody poured through the room, weaving through the air like a ribbon, delicate yet unyielding. As her confidence grew, so did her music. Selena's hands glided over the keys with a grace so fluid it was hard to believe there was a raging storm of emotion inside her. Each note seemed to pour out fragments of her life, the silent sacrifices of her mother, the nights she had spent practicing tirelessly in a cramped room, and the weight of dreams postponed, but never extinguished. The diners fell silent. The laughter, the clinking of plates and glasses had disappeared, giving way to a solemn stillness. Even Mitchell Crane, who had been whispering and chuckling with his friends, fell silent. Selena didn't need to turn around to know the atmosphere had shifted. The mocking energy from earlier had vanished, replaced by something unnamed, perhaps reverence, or maybe a touch of confusion. The music soared higher, and Selena allowed herself to drift along with the current of emotion. For the first time in years, she was no longer a waitress, no longer a silent dreamer. She was simply herself, a musician. Her hands danced across the keys, painting raw emotions so vivid it seemed they were suspended in the air like a faint mist. When Selena struck the final chords, the room was plunged into absolute silence. In that moment, there was not a single sound, only the lingering resonance of the piano. Selena sat still, her hands resting on the keys, unsure of what would happen next. And then, as if released from a trance, the room erupted into applause. The sound roared, bouncing off the walls, filling the room with a warmth Selena had never dared to hope for. A few diners stood up, clapping so fervently that it brought tears to her eyes. Her coworkers, who had been silently watching from afar, joined in, their faces glowing with pride. Only Mitchell Crane remained seated. The smirk that had once been fixed on his lips was gone, replaced by an expression Selena couldn't quite read, part shock, part confusion. He clapped slowly, a sparse, hollow sound amid the thunderous ovation surrounding him. But even his reluctant applause couldn't dim Selena's triumph. She had reclaimed her voice, and no one, no mockery, could ever take that away. As the applause began to fade, the entire room seemed to exhale collectively. Selena slowly rose, her knees still trembling but her back perfectly straight. She looked around, and for the first time that evening, she truly saw the people watching her, not as distant spectators, but as witnesses. In their eyes now was admiration, respect, and a touch of awe. Selena didn't immediately look toward Mitchell. Instead, she gave a slight nod to the diners who had applauded the most enthusiastically, a thin, gentle smile brushing across her lips. It wasn't pride. It was relief. Relief that she hadn't let fear lock away the voice within her. But then, as if drawn by an invisible force, her gaze slowly found Mitchell. He was still sitting there, hands clasped together in front of him, wearing a stiff, expressionless look, as if torn between admitting defeat or clinging to empty pride. "Well," Mitchell finally spoke, his voice louder than necessary, shattering the fragile silence that hung over the room. "That was unexpected." He gave a dry chuckle, missing the arrogance he usually carried. Talent really can come from unexpected places. The words fell heavy, stirring no ripple in the room. Mitchell's friends exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to laugh or remain silent. Selena tilted her head slightly, studying him. Those words, offered like an olive branch, felt stiff, devoid of any real sincerity, like a man defeated, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. "Thank you," Selena replied, her voice calm but firm. There was no warmth, nor was there bitterness. She didn't need words to respond. The performance had already been the sharpest answer. Mitchell cleared his throat awkwardly, clearly flustered under the heavy gaze of the entire room. He motioned for the server to bring more drinks, a futile attempt to reclaim the confidence he had already lost. "You really are talented," he mumbled, as if grudgingly admitting it. Selena only nodded, her eyes never leaving him. "Everyone has talent," she said, each word landing like a cold, sharp cut. "The question is how you choose to use it." The air in the room subtly shifted again, a silent resonance from those witnessing the exchange. Selena's response wasn't loud, nor was it aggressive, but it was more than enough. Mitchell shifted in his seat, the arrogant facade peeling away bit by bit with each passing second. The diners began returning to their meals, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where once there had been vanity and pretense, now there was a more genuine feeling, an unspoken acknowledgement for the girl who had reminded them of the power of integrity. Mitchell hadn't just been embarrassed. He had been exposed. And no mask could hide the truth that everyone in the room now clearly saw. Selena Brooks stepped away from the grand piano, feeling the weight of the moment settling deeply in her chest. Her coworkers greeted her with soft smiles and encouraging nods as she made her way back to the service station. Selena still had a shift to finish, but something in her posture had changed. Her head was held a little higher, her steps slower, more assured. Mitchell Crane's table had fallen silent. His companions, who had once laughed smugly at her discomfort, now awkwardly avoided her gaze. Their conversation had dropped to a clumsy whisper. The arrogance that had once flooded that corner of the restaurant had evaporated, leaving behind an awkward, empty hush. The night continued on, but Selena felt weightless. Each step she took across the dining room carried a new strength, a quiet confidence blossoming within her in ways she had never expected. As Selena refilled glasses and cleared plates, some diners paused to whisper words of praise. "You were wonderful, dear," an elderly woman said with a gentle smile as Selena set down a cup of coffee. "I've never heard anything so moving," the woman added. "Don't stop," another man chimed in. "You have a special gift. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." Selena bowed her head in thanks, her heart swelling with genuine gratitude. Those words of encouragement weren't just polite gestures. They were affirmations of every ounce of effort, every dream she had cradled throughout her life. Mitchell, however, was not nearly as gracious. When Selena approached his table to deliver the bill, Mitchell looked up, his gaze a mix of irritation and a grudging hint of admiration. "You've made your point," Mitchell muttered, his voice dry. "No need to keep showing off." Selena paused, looking him straight in the eye. "I never intended to prove anything to you," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I just wanted to play." Mitchell didn't reply. He awkwardly swirled the wine glass in his hand, the once imposing figure now reduced to an awkward, self-conscious silhouette. The balance of power in that moment had completely shifted, and everyone at the table could feel it. As Mitchell hastily signed the bill with rushed strokes, one of his companions, a young man with a gentler face, looked up at Selena and softly said, "You played beautifully, truly." The sincerity in his voice made Selena pause for a second. In that brief moment, she saw a glimmer of humanity flicker within a group she had once thought was all arrogance and vanity. "Thank you," Selena smiled gently, then quietly walked away. The evening ended with Mitchell and his group quietly leaving the restaurant, a stark contrast to their usual boisterous exits. Selena stood watching them disappear, feeling neither triumphant pride nor lingering bitterness. She no longer cared about Mitchell. Her mind was already set on the path ahead. The tips that night were unexpectedly generous, enough for Selena to cover her rent and even have a little left over for the piano lessons she had been postponing for so long. As Selena locked the restaurant doors and stepped out into the cold night air, the crispness filled her lungs, carrying with it a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Certainty. She was not just a waitress. She was not just a girl with an unfinished dream. She was an artist. And nothing, no ridicule, no financial hardship, no fear could ever take that away from her. As Selena walked through the night, her mind was no longer occupied by what had happened that evening. She thought only of the future, where her dreams, finally, seemed closer than ever before. Selena Brooks sat on the worn wooden chair in her small apartment, her fingers gliding lightly over the keys of her old upright piano. The sound it produced was neither crisp nor full like the grand piano at La Fontaine, but that no longer mattered, because the music flowed from her heart, as it always had. That night, something had shifted inside Selena. Not just a fleeting moment of victory, but a revelation. Her talent was not something to hide or justify. It belonged to her. And that, in itself, was enough. In the days that followed, the story at the restaurant quickly became a widely shared anecdote within the local community. The guests who had been present that night recounted their experience, and the news began to spread far and wide. A few days later, Selena received a phone call from a man who had dined there that evening, Ethan Cole, a music producer visiting from Nashville. He didn't promise instant fame or shallow riches. He simply offered Selena an opportunity. A demo recording session. A small but genuine step toward the dream she had once only dared to glimpse from afar. Selena agreed, not because she believed it would immediately change her life, but because she felt a door was opening. A door that, this time, she was no longer afraid to walk through. For years, Selena had allowed fear and doubt to whisper lies into her ear, that she wasn't good enough, that her dreams were too grand. But now, she saw the truth clearly. Resilience and authenticity were her greatest strengths. The incident with Mitchell Crane was not merely a moment of humiliation reversed. It was a profound reminder of the power of integrity. Mitchell, with all his money and arrogance, had nothing that could truly diminish Selena. He was simply the embodiment of every doubtful voice she had ever faced. And Selena had extinguished all those doubts with nothing but the purity of her talent and her heart. For anyone who followed her story, Selena's message was clear. Never let someone else define your worth. The world out there is full of Mitchell Cranes, people who use their own insecurities to hurt others in order to feel powerful. But true strength comes from standing firm in who you are and letting your passion speak louder than any ridicule. Selena gently closed the piano lid, her hand gliding softly over the worn wood. A smile blossomed on her lips. Her journey was still long ahead. But for the first time in her life, Selena felt it had truly begun.